are these charges to prove?
Well, the government does have to prove that both Mr. Billups and Mr. Billups knew what was going on. So depending on the communications, a lot of times nowadays cases are, body cameras, or in this case, it might be text messages, emails, messages through apps, WhatsApp, Signal, things like that. So depending on the communication, it could be very easy for the prosecution. But if they don't have something like a smoking gun here, then they'd have to prove what was in their heads. They can't just prove that they were part of it. They'd have to prove that they knowingly knew that it was a fraud and continued to participate.
Yeah, and this early in the stage, it doesn't seem like we have all the evidence as to what exactly the government is going to allege. But clearly there's an indictment. There are 30 people indicted in this huge scheme that runs all sorts of mafia families, from the Genovese to the Gambino family. And the allegations that Chauncey Billups was used, if you will, as the face, the star face that would entice other people to come to use their money, to gamble this money. Almost in one of the cases, they said that there were text messages by some of these mafia defendants that Chauncey Billups, it seemed as though they wanted to give him the money in the poker game because they were so starstruck. But then again, how do they prove that Chauncey Billups knew that this was happening?
So that's where the communication would have to come in, because when a crime takes place inside somebody's head, I knew that this was happening and I chose to do it anyway. Then they have to prove it by circumstantial evidence or through direct evidence. And the only direct evidence they could have would be, text messages, communications. Now, there may be informants. However, those are always defensible. A defense attorney can always say, look, you were charged, you were facing time, you're here cooperating with the government, you're trying to get a better deal, aren't you? And they can throw anything that's not recorded, into doubt. However, if there's recordings, audio recordings, over the phone recordings, that's the evidence that they would use.
That would be easier. The government alleging that at least in one instance, Chauncey Billups was wired $50,000 after one of these games. Is simply being affiliated with the mafia enough to be found guilty?
No, I don't believe so. It might be, enough for a lesser crime, like you were playing in an illegal poker game. However, for the serious charges that they're alleging here, they'd have to prove that they knew that this was a rigged game, that it was a mafia, and that people were being cheated, and that they knowingly participated. So just hanging out with mafia people, that's not a crime.
Yeah, and these are serious charges: money laundering conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy charges. The two charges here for Chauncey Billups. What does a potential guilty sentence look like?
Well, on paper, it's decades. It's up to 40 years. However, here we have people with no criminal records, who are well into their life, older gentlemen. And, with plea bargains, and if there's restitution paid, if the people who lost money were made whole, then I would anticipate that plea agreements would mean much lower numbers.
Okay. And clearly, if you plead to something like that, that could cost you your job. It could do all sorts of things to your life there. We'll see what happens. But we should also make light and point out that Chauncey Billups did plead not guilty today in federal court of these two charges. We'll see what happens here as this all unravels. A case, I know, Joseph, that a lot of people will be following closely, as there are so many big names tied to it. But Chauncey Billups, one of the larger names there in this indictment. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Take care.
Same. All right, let's move on as a federal judge is pushing back on the Justice Department's plan to remove Kilmar Abrego Garcia to Liberia. The DOJ telling the court it was ready to deport him this week.